Hi, I'm Arlene Nelson here, ASC cinematographer, speaking with Brendan Bellomo, the director, editor, and writer of the Porcelain War documentary. Thanks so much for speaking with me, Brendan.
Thank you so much, Arlene. It's a pleasure. I'm so glad that you were interested to chat, and yeah, honored to get to have a little conversation.
Great. I'll also just give a little brief introduction, a little synopsis of the film in case anyone hasn't seen it yet. Porcelain War is an urgent, intimate, and unfathomable story. I was so taken by it. It is set against the backdrop of this brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it includes three artists who are defiantly finding inspiration and beauty as they are defending their country and their culture. Uh, the in, the unfathomable part is that this war is being waged by professional soldiers against ordinary citizens. Slava Leontiev, your co-director, um, Anya Stasenko, and Andrei Stefanov, who is the cinematographer. Um, they choose to stay behind, and they are armed with their art, cameras, and for the first time in their lives, their guns. And it's a very, very powerful film. So congratulations on such a special film. Your film is a breakaway documentary. It's got a long list of accolades, including the Sundance Grand Jury Prize, most recently DGA winner. It's picked up nominations for Producers Guild, the Motion Picture Academy Award, and of course the ASC nomination. Why do you think what is the reason your film is resonating with so many people?
Mm. I think cinema at its best is holding up a mirror to the human experience, and this is holding up a mirror to a completely unexpected set of choices, which is to create something new in the midst of destruction. You know, when you think about war, you picture with hope, with humanity, the opposite of this, which is usually what we call peace, tranquility. But I believe that the opposite of war is creativity, creation. That's what I've come to really understand. And when you look at everyday people, you know, the participants in this film are artists, sculptor, painter. They're civilians. They're totally normal people. They're pacifists. And to see that they've chosen to teach themselves to pick up weapons and they're fighting back, not about defending their territory or just their families, but to defend their culture in the face of history, to defend democracy. It's at risk around the world now more than ever, but to do this through an affirmation of their perspective, their emotional truth that really matters by creating their art. It's a personal testament of what they're seeing and the way they see the world. And just that act, just that creative act is this resilience, this defiance. And I think what's so incredible about them is they wanted to tell their story. They wanted to learn cinema to do that. And the film itself in this regard becomes an act of resilience.
Mm, yeah, that one of the things that I think also makes this film so unique is, of course, that there these everyday people find themselves in this extraordinary moment and they meet the moment and they become soldiers for the first time and then filmmakers for the first time. And what I mean that aspect of it, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that backstory of how you got the cameras to them, which cameras, and the fact that they're becoming the cinematographer becomes a cinematographer for the first time as well as a soldier for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about this notion of kind of resonance, how maybe people are affected by the film. It's I think this notion of educating oneself in the use of language is something that's really universal. It's very appealing to us in the film community. It's very appealing to people around the world. This notion that your story matters, and this other side of it, which is that you can learn through craft, through art, to tell it, to share it. And I think cinema is the most powerful of our languages on this planet. I think it's the most universal, the most emotional, maybe the most accurately descriptive of certain feelings that are really hard to say in any other way. And so what happened is this: we came together because one of our producers actually grew up under Russian oppression in communist Poland. Aniela Sidorska, whose family escaped to the United States and they became political refugees here. And about almost 10 years ago now, she discovered Anya and Slava's work, and she was so moved by the stories that they tell on these tiny porcelain figurines. They're about this big. I think what it was, they reminded her of home, but also she said something to me recently. She said, when you grow up under oppression or when you're living under oppression, your vision is still huge. And I thought this is really incredible. And their stories are just absolutely grand. And we wanted to work together, actually, as two couples. Aniela and I are husband and wife, a filmmaking team, and Anya and Slava work together as well. And their love story is very, very potent and powerful part of the film. And so we began this collaboration on an animation project together, and then Russia invaded, and we found out, called them up to see what was going on, what if they were safe when they were leaving. It was just incredible to even know someone that's near a war, let alone in the middle of it. And Slava said, "No, we're going to stay. We're going to keep making our art at night." And I said, "What are you doing during the day?" And he told me, "I'm in the Ukrainian Special Forces and I'm teaching civilians, everyday people, to fight back." And so in this moment, we all knew this was a story that we had to share with the world. And so we wanted to figure out, okay, how can we bring cameras there? What can we do? So we actually discovered that there's no real easy way to ship something into a war zone, but there was a network of volunteers, and it was this makeup artist from New Jersey who was stockpiling medical supplies in her apartment. She was bringing 50 or 60 duffel bags of med kits at a time. She said, "I'll bring the camera to Slava. I'm going to take it into Poland and we drive it to Ukraine with all these other materials." And that was amazing. But we realized we have a much bigger problem. We're separated by 6,000 miles. We're separated by language barrier. Slava and I did not speak the same language at all, and by the largest conflict in Europe since World War II. So we could only communicate over Zoom with an interpreter. But I realized, okay, if we can establish an impromptu film school, if they can translate their instincts as visual storytellers into cinema, then we have a fighting chance of telling this story. And we were working on Zoom. We would try every day, okay, speak to the interpreter, they're translating, but it was so frustrating, so difficult that we got really bored, to be honest. And we begin to sketch, and these little sketches became storyboards, and those grew into blocking diagrams and concepts for shots and visual metaphors. And we looked at paintings and clips of films and screen captures of Lester Mullen, like we're looking at Days of Heaven, we're looking at Thin Red Line, and Andre is sharing
Mm.
paintings, and all of a sudden we realize we're totally fluent in visual art. We can speak the same language, no problem. And so this collaboration became so rich. And at the very beginning of the process, I asked Slava, "Is there anyone you know who could just press record on the tripod?" And he said, "I know someone, and I'm going to send you something and you tell me what you think." And he sends me this folder of photographs of oil paintings.
Mhm.
And I was absolutely blown away. And I always think about this. It's like, there's artwork that's like a postcard, right? It's like, this is a great painting. That's really nice composition picture. And then there's something that's beautiful, but it produces an emotion within you. And one work after another, it was a master a master painter. And I thought, this is a cinematographer already. He just needs
Mm,
to become a camera operator. He knows where to put his
mm.
focus, so he knows where to put the camera. And this was the beginnings of.
Even though he was not a cinematographer.
No, he'd never used a camera before. The first thing he asked is, how do I turn it on? And then we go through, and it's okay, focus, exposure, aperture, f-stop, shutter angle, on and on and on and on. But where it became an enriching conversation is that stuff was relatively straightforward. I mean, with the language barrier, it's really tough. But I had a duplicate of every piece of equipment here, like literally
Mm,
on this table, and we would sit and we'd go, okay, like this, yes, here, okay. What was so beautiful was to talk about the language, but like cinematography has nothing to do with that. The cameras, it's all the same. It's fine. Talk about shot size, coverage patterns, the 180-degree rule. You see more, it just grew and grew. It's okay. Okay, we can have constant backlighting. We're going to rotate around. It's all going to be time of day. And Andre, he's obsessive. He shot, by the time we were done, we sent 15 camera bodies. They filmed 500 hours of footage. Andre's camera, 0 shots underexposed or overexposed in a war zone. And he's never done it before because he was feeling the light. He's not thinking.
mm,
And we would talk about
mm.
the feeling of distance, focal length choice, and this vibe. And it was so intuitive for him. And they were so experimental in this process. I mean, I thought you're in a war zone and you're trying different little tests and ideas, and they're playful and it's beautiful. And I thought that's what it is to be an artist. They're not going to just say, okay, we're going to shoot
Hmm.
news style footage or something. I talked with Slava about this at the beginning. He's like, the news gets old. We've seen this. There's so much important journalism that has been done in that vein, but we have to do something.
Right.
We're going to do something completely different. It's going to be very emotional. And for me, I wanted to support them. I wanted to go with a crew and to bring a team, but I talked with my producers, and the footage
Mm.
we were getting at the very beginning, the dailies we were looking at, all of us together, it was so super immersive, super intimate, really emotional. If I come and I'm there with Anya and Slava, all of a sudden the dog is barking at the boom and the camera operator is casting a shadow and the conversation is shifted. And this could be maybe for the first time the most pure form of verite cinema possible. You have artists filming their own story. And we have a deep collaboration, but it's at a great distance. So I can work with them within the language of cinema, but I'm not there. It's like there's no set. There's no, I mean, it's a documentary anyways, but there's still a sense of like you're being filmed. We took that away.
You really feel that. And that's why I called it urgent in the beginning, because you feel the urgency. And at the same time, it's so intimate. And you really get the emotionality in the cinematography. It's so it's so harmoniously balanced. And you really just your description of the process that you went through and just the thinking that is behind it, you feel it in every frame, like you said. And that is extraordinary. And emotional. It just you really but through the cinematography, it's so emotional.
Oh,
And yeah,
thank
and you really feel that in every frame. And it's extraordinary. I love that you said you just said the stories were so big and and but then you have like the porcelain the tiny little porcelain figures which has their story painted on them, and it reminds one of like how we're specks of sand and so it's that beautiful duality.
and it's a focus on there's a total duality in tiny things because tiny things can be emblematic of innocence, and this was a big focus for them. In the middle of shelling, they would be going out into nature and they're filming a caterpillar. They're working on all of these different angles and they're filming light trickling through little leaves. And I'm thinking, this is extraordinary. There's other people on the
Mm.
team at the time. They're like, this is not a nature documentary. What is this? What is this? And I'm like, no, they have no concept of B-roll. They don't know what a cutaway is. If they're choosing to film this in a war zone, it has equal meaning to an interview or an establishing shot of a destroyed building. And so it's a testament to what inspires them, what they're protecting, that which is totally innocent, beautiful, pure, and is in dire risk of being destroyed. And the second thing about small things, to me, I think to Anya and Slava, is you recognize they can hold tremendous power. There is a ripple effect that can occur when there's an act of bravery, of humanity, of creation, of generosity, these little things that go, they set an example or they just help somebody, and that has the biggest meaning. And so I think because they contain their stories, the stories of their lives are really powerful, very complicated, very metaphorical on something that is this almost micro canvas, and it's the surface of an animal that has its own personality, but then there's the story is wrapped on the skin of this guy. It's a really unique art form, I think, very, very, very specific to them and very self-consistent from one work to another. Even if you remove Anya's paintings, Slava's shapes, you can feel it's in his style. And it's really took, I think, many decades of master work to get there, a lot of
Mm.
experiments. So I don't know, it was a true honor to work with them because they're operating at this really high level. I mean, they're total humanists. And
Yeah, you
yeah,
feel that. Yeah. I'm curious because we're talking about the cameras, but you haven't specified what cameras they are, and I'm sure this will
yeah,
come as a surprise.
no, it's a super interesting question because for me, the choice of the camera was something that had to satisfy an emotional goal, which is the immersion, and an artistic goal, which is a great flexibility in a really difficult time. So we needed something super small and super easy, but with a great integrity to the image. So we found the Blackmagic pocket camera, and shooting totally raw for the whole film would be excellent because Andre could really understand the dynamic range. He understood it. He really understood it. And he knew exactly how to place this with the sky, everything, everything. And I would show him the dailies. We would look all the time. You can go here, Andre. I can bring this cloud back, or I can bring this underexposure back. And he would say, okay, okay, Brendan. And then he would, it's great. And what we did with this is something that was a choice of mine. I grew up in the darkroom. I grew up shooting film, shooting Super 16. And if I could send many, many 416s and they could be rolling on film, the whole thing, we would do it. But we don't have a lab in Ukraine. We don't have the ability to send this many rolls, like maybe like over 1 million feet of film. It's too much. So but Andre is a painter. The way he sees the world is texture, and it's very filmic. His paintings have a pointillism that is echoing the feel of silver halides. It's echoing shooting on negative. And so for many years, I worked to design something called Invisigrain, a system that recreates
Mm,
the digital image out of actual film grains, a simulation of
mm,
full chemistry, even the lab chemistry. So we use this on the film, and it was something that
mm,
how to bring life to the image because it's no longer pixels; it becomes crystals, silver halide crystals, and it's really
mm,
even on a lock off. Everything is alive, exactly like it's
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
these guys.
And that was placed over the whole film?
The whole film goes through these
Oh,
grains, and this could unify all the different camera bodies because we have
yes.
also GoPros and also drones. So we bring the colorimetry together, but then we bring the texture together. And I
Mm,
really worked to try to balance that feeling because there needed to be a consistency. Because it's not like when we go to the point of view of the military that the human relationship changes. It can't. It needs to still have the same feeling. Luckily we're switching systems, so I'm not doing a one-to-one match in that. So that helped, but we still really tried to kind of calibrate stuff together. And again, it's not for like a
so that
tech.
it, yeah, so that it keeps you in the story. I was
Yeah,
never broken out, whether it was a drone or the GoPro or the Black Magic. Like all those textures, still there was that consistency.
Oh, that's great. We work very hard on that because, the way they see the world is
Mm,
unchanging. They're always filtering everything through art. So there was a rationale behind it. It's not like aesthetic first, this looks cool, that has no
right,
argument, right?
right.
Even you think about the notion for me or the notion for Andre, we talk about this stuff of when the highlights are blowing out, there's a little halation and glow. It's not because it looks cool, it's because it tells you something more about the image that you cannot display. It speaks to you about the dynamic range, how bright the sun is on this bird, how beautiful this cloud is. You're bringing emotional information in the image so that there's a reason behind it. So that kind of stuff we really discussed and we made sure that we were really unified on the feeling. And the color palette of the film is influenced by Andre's paintings
Mm, mm,
because I know
yes.
how he sees the world and I can really feel it and we represent that in the grade. So that was it was a very iterative process, right? People might picture, okay, you're working on other sides of the world, the footage just comes in and you're editing and that's it. It couldn't be more apart from the process because we're looking at dailies every day. We look at what they shot yesterday, we're marking it up on the screen. Andre, what if the camera comes behind this guy with the rifle? What if we feel as if we are him? What if this? What if that? And Andre says, Brendan, what if we bring the camera lower and we get the reflection? And then they go and shoot it again and again. And it's like
Mm,
a constant process of, they're obsessive. So they're going out magic hour every day. In the middle of winter, they'll set up a fire on the top of a frozen lake and wait for the light to drink tea. And then they start shooting. And it's perfect. It was so enjoyable. And this is a very serious film, but it was also incredibly fun to collaborate with them. And that's the thing where it's like it feels like an inappropriate word to use, but the power of art and the power of their choices is they're deciding to keep living. They're not succumbing to fear. They want to make something, and we got to do that together. And that was really, really special.
there is a joyfulness to the footage, to the film that, it, like you're saying, again, the word I keep thinking of is duality because you know that there's a war going on right there. I mean, just like the juxtaposition of like where the landmines are and the dog running around in the field and you just you in that moment you just you get to breathe and just enjoy what they're fighting for, but then at the same time knowing that they could stand on a landmine at any moment, so that tension is there. Could you talk about the use of the drones because they're so haunting and just really, again, it wasn't just like use a drone for drone's sake. I would just love to hear a little bit about the process, the thinking process behind that.
Absolutely. We really let the camera follow what was necessary to the story and their curiosity as artists and their willingness, their bravery to share different things constantly changed this growing equipment package. So on one end of the spectrum, and I'm going to come to the drone a little later because we have to begin over here, they were very, very curious to be filming nature and they wanted to get closer and closer. And so we said, okay, we could send some macro lenses. And they said, yes, this is great, but there's even more, there's even more. And so we would send probe lenses. And all of a sudden, they're filming
Ah,
super, super tiny stuff and all of these experimental perspectives. And then I started teaching them about slow motion and stretching time, and they were loving this. And so they're really going on all these different dimensions to unveil these animals and flora and fauna, plants that they love and that are really inspiring their work very directly. They're collecting them. They love this particular color. It goes under the figurine. It becomes a part of the story. So this was like big for them. And then they started going the other way. And Slava was saying, maybe we could have another camera for the unit. And I said, well, this could be very cumbersome. It's still, you have to hold it. What about a body camera? So he said, yes, this is great. And then he said, well, we also have pilots. And I started learning about the unit. They are experts in aerial reconnaissance. They're really, I mean, special forces drone pilots they're operating at this really, really high level. and they've been training themselves for a long time to do this. And Slava said they're willing to take camera drones as well. They're going to be flying their own missions, but there's multiple pilots, so they can also be filming. And I'm thinking, okay, so they're running their mission, but I'm like, we can do air to air cinematography, one UAV filming another, because these guys can do it because they're coordinating at that level. So Slav was like, okay, we're going to meet. So they would go down into a bunker in the middle of a mission on satellite internet, and we would sit and we'd have like a camera department briefing, which was to basically go through and they say, okay, we know how to fly. We get it. We understand the lens, this and this. They already are doing that. They're controlling the cameras for their own missions. Tell us about film. And so we would talk about establishing shots and the weight of the horizon, time of day, and catching water reflections and foreground objects to create scale. And all of a sudden, we go into this big composition class, and they would go back out into the mission. And they return. I'm like, are you guys okay? And they're like, yeah, we're fine. How's the shot? And they would be uploading over Starlink. We came up with this whole encrypted pipeline so they could send all
Mm.
this raw footage, and it would go into these air-gapped servers with big firewalls, and we really, really worked hard to safeguard them. But what occurred, the reason behind the drones is context. When they're filming something small without showing the totality of the landscape that it's in, you don't understand how many families this is affecting, how many people are volunteering. There's a very small formal military force in Ukraine, but these are it's a volunteer military, and they're everyday people, right? In Slavas Union, you've got dairy farmer, an IT professional, graphic designer, doctor. And so when you see the beauty around them burning, trenches cutting through farmers' fields that are filled with landmines. You can't go and get the food from there, so it's rotting. And yet, on the horizon, there's this striking beauty, and they're working to capture that. It gave them not only a way to share what they're going through, because they felt if they could, that somebody else wouldn't have to follow in their shoes in the future, but a creative release, an act of making something during their mission that they could say, okay, we're going to step away, we're going to make something else. So I thought this is just amazing. But there was a totally unexpected thing that happened. I learned that in when they complete a mission, they would go to a psychological decompression. They'd have a kind of therapy workshop, all these different stuff that they would do, which is an amazing resource. But I showed them the rough cut of the film, and they said watching that was more powerful than any other help that they'd received. To see what
Wow.
it was unreal.
Wow. Wow. Because they're so in it that they,
Yes, yes, and it
yeah.
was so it's a set it's an additional when they talk about what they're doing, they're like we're fighting not for our territory or our property. We're doing this in the face of history. They're
Mm.
seeing it on this broader level of defending their culture, that the front line for democracy and freedom extends beyond Ukraine throughout the world where it's at risk in so many places. So for them to then see like this testament, this record of their experience, it was really is super existential.
Yeah. And again, I think part of why it resonates, it's so human. And the whole film is just it's so human and again it's that idea of being I love that like the macro and the spec and the smallness of the art and then you've got the just the pull out and the wide drone shots and and you see like how this is affecting one, two, three artists, but then also just, you multiply that by, the population, and it's just mind blowing that, they're not alone. And you know, and then you think about God, they must feel like so alone in the world, like what they're doing.
100%. It's crazy that you're saying that, Arlene, because at the very beginning, I was asking Anya how she was feeling, and she said, "We feel like we're so alone here. We feel like we're on the moon." And it was just like, wow, it really, really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? That comes out. It comes out in the film. It really does. It is such a beautiful film. And I congratulate you and the artists. And it's really wonderful. So
Thank you so
I'm
much.
so happy it is getting so much recognition and attention, and people are seeing it because that will take away the aloneness.
I sincerely hope that is the case, and I do know in absolute certainty that for everyone who participated in the film, and for many Ukrainians who are aware of the film or have seen it, they feel that it's really making a difference for people to be able to step into their shoes and to see this world through their eyes, and to deliver something that's not it's not an expected message from what would otherwise be a quote unquote war film. It's
Yes.
hopeful and it's about creativity. There may be hard parts to watch, but it's like Slava says, his responsibility as an artist is to show something different, to show beauty. And I think that's really important. And it's just a testament to how strong they are as visual storytellers.
Yes. Well, congratulations. And
Thank you so
I
much.
really can't wait to see where else it goes. And it's very exciting. And I can't wait for more and more people to see it.
Likewise. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for such a special conversation. It's really great to meet.
Yeah. Likewise. Likewise. Yeah. When I first saw it, the first like 10 minutes, I called my daughter and my husband. I was like, just watch the first 10 minutes. And yeah, and they were blown away. Blown away. My daughter is an artist and my husband is also a filmmaker. So
Oh,
they
no way.
were just, yeah, so it really struck them. And yeah, I think also the really surprising thing for me, because like you're saying, you hear these news stories and you see the stories, but not like this. You're like, it's these are everyday people with being put in this extraordinary circumstance, and they're rising to the challenge. Maybe that's another reason why it resonates with people, because people maybe want to think about, like, could I do that? Could I rise to the challenge like
100%.
that?
100%. I mean, it's Anya talks about this in the film. She has this concept where she used to think, okay, people who are heroes, I've only seen them, in books or movies, literature, but she was like, people who are shining from within, they're everywhere around you and they emerge in this time and you realize they're right there. And I really think that's true. I think adversity
Mm,
breeds creativity. It brings out empathy, generosity, self-sacrifice, all of these beautiful human things. And yeah, they're uh, you know, the way that they told their story and the way that I think I was really wanted to focus on this from the very beginning was taking away any labels in a sense, right? Like if you look at the news, you say, this is a soldier, they say a refugee and the name and this, and you say, oh,
right.
you put them in a box without even knowing it in your mind. It's an inadvertent dehumanization. And if
Mm,
you instead hear through their voice, see in their eyes, you could really walk in their shoes for this 88 minutes of the film. And that time, I think, expands and it lives
mm.
more in your mind. It's an invitation to imagine yourself within this situation. And I think we cannot compete with that on the screen. The film, if it's operating properly, is creating an invitation. And then the imagination of the audience can take over and have way more power. And so we really tried to do this as much as possible.
You've succeeded.
Thank you so much for that.